You've been told your whole life that love is the highest expression of the human soul, that to love is to be noble, to sacrifice, to give yourself completely to another. But what if that's a lie? What if the love you've been taught to worship isn't a sign of strength, but a symptom of weakness? Friedrich Nietzsche didn't romanticize love. He dissected it. He saw how it strips people of their will, how it turns desire into dependence, how it turns the pursuit of greatness into a craving for comfort. Love, in its most common form, is not about connection. It's about possession. Not about freedom, but about control. And the deeper you fall into it without understanding it, the more you risk becoming something Nietzsche warned against, a smaller version of yourself. The kind of love we glorify today often demands your power in exchange for validation. It asks you to put someone else's happiness above your own truth. It teaches you that self-sacrifice is noble and self-prioritization is selfish. But Nietzsche saw through that illusion. He believed that anything that makes you weaker, more dependent, more fragile, more afraid of loss, cannot be sacred. And that includes love. This isn't about becoming heartless. It's about waking up. It's about understanding the forces that quietly shape your desires and asking yourself, is this really love? Or is this a beautifully disguised escape from loneliness, purpose, and the burden of becoming who I'm meant to be? Today, we go into the harsh truth Nietzsche dared to speak. Not because he wanted to destroy love, but because he wanted to free you from the kind that destroys you. The kind that doesn't lift you, but drains you. The kind that doesn't make you more, but makes you disappear. Let's begin. You've heard it so many times, it feels like truth. Real love is selfless. But Nietzsche would have laughed at that, not out of cynicism, but out of clarity. He understood something most people refuse to admit. Love is rarely about the other person. It's about what the other person gives you: security, attention, identity, meaning. We call it selfless. But peel back the layers, and you'll find a quiet hunger beneath it all. A hunger to be seen, to be chosen, to not be alone. Love, in the way we've been taught to understand it, is dressed up as sacrifice. But Nietzsche saw sacrifice as often being a mask for weakness. When people give themselves away, it's not always because they're strong. It's because they're afraid. Afraid of abandonment. Afraid of being unworthy. Afraid of what it would mean to stand alone. So they love recklessly. They merge. They lose themselves and call it devotion. This isn't love. It's dependency. It's the kind of emotional contract where your sense of worth lives in someone else's hands. And when that love is threatened, the cracks begin to show. Jealousy, possessiveness, desperation. All the things we claim love transcends, but in truth, it often incubates them. Nietzsche's genius wasn't in rejecting love. It was in exposing how easily we lie to ourselves about what it is. He believed that anything rooted in need, not strength, cannot lead to liberation. And love that is born from a wounded place, from a need to be completed or saved, will always lead to collapse. Selfless love, then, is not noble. It's dangerous. Because the moment you hand your identity to someone else, you don't grow. You vanish. And Nietzsche's entire philosophy is a war cry against that kind of disappearance. Chapter 2. The Morality Trap. Love as Control. They tell you love makes you good. That to love is to be kind, forgiving, endlessly giving. But Nietzsche didn't see love as a virtue. He saw how it was weaponized by morality to tame the human spirit. Because the kind of love we're taught to aspire to doesn't just ask for your heart, it asks for your obedience. In a world where power is feared, morality rebrands weakness as virtue. It tells you that to be self-denying is noble, that to put others first always is holy, that to love someone means to shrink your needs, silence your instincts, and dissolve your will. This isn't love, it's control, dressed as compassion. And it works because it feels good, because it's wrapped in the language of sacrifice and purity. Because if you refuse it, you're called selfish, cold, broken. Nietzsche saw how love became one of morality's sharpest tools. It doesn't need force, it uses shame. You give up your power willingly, convinced that doing so makes you good. You stay in places where you are unfulfilled, just so you can say you tried. You tolerate dishonesty, betrayal, even abuse, because love is supposed to endure, supposed to forgive, supposed to suffer. But that kind of love doesn't elevate the human spirit. It weakens it. It turns powerful individuals into martyrs, not because they are heroic, but because they've been conditioned to equate goodness with self-erasure. And society rewards that erasure with applause, never asking what it costs. Nietzsche's warning was simple. Any love that demands your silence is not love, it's domination. The morality trap works because it makes you think you're choosing virtue, when in truth, you're choosing to disappear. And no love is worth that trade, not ever. Inside you, two forces are always moving. One pulls you toward desire, toward intimacy, connection, and the warmth of being wanted. The other pulls you toward expansion, toward strength, achievement, and self-overcoming. Nietzsche called that second force the will to power, the deep, instinctual drive, not just to survive, but to become. But what happens when these two forces collide? Love, especially romantic love, can feel like transcendence. But for many, it quietly becomes a substitute for purpose. You stop striving for your highest self because you're wrapped in comfort. You trade your ambitions for emotional safety. The hunger for greatness is replaced by the need to be needed. And slowly, without ever making a conscious decision, your edge dulls. Nietzsche never denied the beauty of Eros, but he saw how easily it can seduce you into softness, not tenderness, the kind that makes you strong, but the kind that makes you forget. Forget the path you were walking before someone else became your destination. You think you found wholeness, but often you've just paused your growth. For love, for belonging, for peace. And in that peace, something in you begins to die. This is the clash Nietzsche wanted us to see. The drive for power doesn't hate love. It simply demands that love does not come at the cost of your becoming. When Eros dims your will to rise, it becomes a distraction, not a gift. It turns the hero into the companion, the creator into the caretaker, the lion into the lamb. Real power is not the absence of love. It's the refusal to let love become your ceiling. The moment your desire for connection outweighs your drive for growth, you don't just fall in love, you fall out of yourself. And Nietzsche believed that was the greatest betrayal of all. At first, it feels beautiful to lose yourself in someone, to dissolve the boundaries, to speak in we instead of I. It feels like unity, like trust, like finally being seen. But Nietzsche saw something more dangerous behind that feeling. something few are willing to name. He saw disappearance. The idea that love should complete you is one of the most seductive myths ever told. That you are half a person and someone else will make you whole. But wholeness that depends on someone else is not wholeness. It's fusion. And when two people fuse without strength, without clarity, without sovereignty, they don't rise together. They collapse into each other. And in that collapse, identity fades. Nietzsche believed the self is sacred, not in a selfish, egotistical way, but in the sense that you are a becoming, an unfolding, a force. And when you hand over that process to someone else, when their validation becomes your mirror, their presence your oxygen, you stop becoming. You start orbiting. You call it devotion, but it's dependency. You call it intimacy, but it's erasure. The most dangerous thing about love isn't heartbreak. It's self-abandonment. It's when you forget who you are without them. When your choices become compromises. When your future bends to their comfort. You give so much, so willingly, that you don't even notice what's been lost until you're a stranger to your own voice. Nietzsche didn't reject connection. He rejected the kind of love that asks you to trade your becoming for belonging. The kind that flatters you into softness, then molds you into silence. Love that weakens the self is not romantic. It's regressive. Because the moment you disappear into another person, the world doesn't gain a lover. It loses a soul that was meant to rise. Chapter 5. Love and the Death of the Übermensch. Nietzsche's vision of the Übermensch wasn't just an ideal. It was a challenge, a call to rise above comfort, conformity, and the inherited morality of the herd, to become the creator of your own values, to shape your life like a sculptor, chiseling meaning from the raw stone of existence. But there's one thing that kills that ascent faster than failure, and it's love, when love becomes escape. The Übermensch must be alone, not in isolation, but in sovereignty. He must walk through doubt, chaos, and transformation without clutching someone else for balance, because that balance, when outsourced, becomes dependence. And dependence is a death sentence to self-overcoming. Romantic love, for all its poetry, often seduces you back into the herd, into safety, into compromise. You give up your solitude for the illusion of completion. You soften your edges to stay lovable. And before long, the fire that once drove you forward now flickers beneath the weight of domestic comfort and emotional negotiation. Nietzsche didn't write for the half-awake. He wrote for those willing to suffer, to question, to destroy what no longer served them. And love, as it's commonly lived, often becomes a narcotic, a beautiful distraction that numbs the pain of becoming something more. The path to the Übermensch requires discipline. It requires that you remain faithful to your vision, even when it costs you connection, especially then. Because the higher you climb, the more alone you must be. Not forever, but long enough to stop confusing validation with truth. The Übermensch doesn't reject love. He transcends the version of it that seduces the soul into submission. He doesn't seek to be adored. He seeks to become. And if love survives that becoming, it's not weakness. It's proof that the fire never dimmed. Not all love ends in heartbreak. Some love rots slowly. It lingers long after the passion has faded, clinging to duty, guilt, and the unspoken belief that someone else is responsible for your happiness. And Nietzsche saw this not as romance, but as decay. Because beneath the sweetness of devotion, resentment begins to grow. It happens when the love you gave becomes a transaction, when your sacrifices turn into silent expectations. You gave everything. You made them your world. And when they couldn't live up to it, something shifted. Not openly, not with rage, but with a quiet, corrosive sense of betrayal. You call it disappointment, but Nietzsche had another name for it: resentment. Resentment isn't anger. It's disguised powerlessness. It's what happens when you want to act, but instead, you suffer. You moralize. You make your pain noble. You convince yourself that endurance is virtue, that silence is strength, that bitterness is love. But it isn't. It's self-betrayal repackaged as righteousness. In the name of love, you hide your rage. You say you're understanding, but deep down, you're keeping score. And every unmet need becomes proof that they failed you. But Nietzsche would ask, did they fail you? Or did you abandon yourself and call it love? This is the danger he warned of, when love becomes a moral weapon, when it stops being a choice and starts being a debt. When your own weakness, your refusal to speak, to leave, to stand tall, gets blamed on the other. That's not love. That's bondage. To love without resentment, you must first love without erasure. You must give without martyrdom. Because when love turns into blame, it's not their fault. It's yours, for turning your need into a virtue and your silence into a cage. Nietzsche never said love was worthless. He said the version of love we worship, one built on need, sacrifice, and soft resignation, was unworthy of the person we could become. He didn't reject connection. He rejected decay. And in its place, he offered a new vision. Love as creation. Real love, in Nietzsche's eyes, was not about losing yourself. It was about expanding, not melting into another, but standing beside them, whole, unbroken, alive. He imagined a kind of love that did not weaken your will, but intensified it. A bond that didn't ask you to compromise your soul, but challenged you to deepen it. This is the love that doesn't beg. It doesn't demand. It doesn't hide behind morality or sacrifice. It says, I do not need you, but I choose you. Not because you complete me, but because you amplify what I already am. Together, we do not dissolve. We build, not cages, not comfort, but new worlds. That kind of love requires strength. It requires standing fully in your truth, even when it shakes the foundation of the relationship. It demands that you confront your own emptiness rather than expecting someone else to fill it. And it dares you to love without possession, without dependency, without disappearing. Most people never reach this kind of love, because most people never become strong enough to stand alone. But for those who do, for those who walk the fire of becoming, the love that follows is not a distraction from their path. It's a mirror of it, fierce, clear, unapologetic. Nietzsche's harsh truth was never to kill love. It was to strip it of illusion. So what's left isn't less, it's more. Not the love that softens the soul, but the love that sharpens it. The kind that doesn't consume, but creates.